Mmm. Fancy. This week I was feeling inspired by Super Ray Dizzle's take on the dollar store art supply challenge, and so I thought I would do one on this channel as well, but do a little bit of a more painting emphasis, because y'all know I love them paints. I actually filmed this a few weeks ago before some shiz went down in my life, so I figured we'd go over all my dollar store art supply haul anyway now, even though they're all used. You'll get to see what I did this 3 weeks ago for this channel. This isn't going well, is it? Now that I've used these already, I have a pretty good idea about what I liked and didn't like, but I'll introduce them all very neutrally. First, we have this set of watercolors. Depending on where you are, some of the dollar stores just have way better supplies than others, and my particular dollar store had the worst paintbrushes. I was not about to use one of these guys. Focus. Anyways, so I used my regular paintbrushes, which are also cheap, but full disclosure. The next set of paints I got were, I don't even really know. I thought that they were watercolors, but I really don't believe they are anymore. They're very like powdery. Then I got some acrylics, and can I just tell you guys, this is where the dollar store really let me down. Okay, this set looks fine, but this is literally what this paint set looked like when I brought it home. What is this? What is Mama supposed to do with that? It's like that green. What the crap? Check your supplies before you wreck your supplies. Once upon a time when I taught art, I was at this like 3-day conference that was like 12 hours a day, and all we had out on the tables were these washable markers, like Crayola markers. And so I used them as watercolors, and it worked out quite well. I just drew with them and I mixed water in with it, and it had a really nice washy ink vibe. Figured I would try these out, see if I could make them be painty for us at all. I already know how that went, but you don't. And I can't remember if I even used these. I bought these permanent markers, and that's all I gotta say about that. That's it for my supplies. We're gonna jump right into this footage. I made 3 paintings for this challenge, and let's see how they did, shall we? Welcome to the voiceover. First of all, I wanted to do a little test of all of our materials to see if it worked in the ways that I intended, which right off the bat with these washable markers, you can probably see it didn't go super well. I'm assuming that had to do with the quality of the marker and them not just having a lot of ink in them. Moving on to these woulda, coulda, shoulda been watercolors. Yeah, I was super disappointed in these. They were super powdery, they didn't have great pigment, I just couldn't get any colors that I really wanted, and I didn't think I'd be able to build them up in any feasible way. So, you know, that's always a disappointment. Are these even supposed to be watercolors? Do you guys know? Now, I didn't show this transition, but next I'm using the acrylic little couplets that I have over to the left there to do some yellow, and I was quite happy with the way that came out. I thought it was a much richer color, creamy goodness. Once again, going in with that washable marker and just having a hard time, but I wanted to see how it would work if I tried mixing it with different paints, those acrylic paints, and I didn't really mix super well, but some options to think about. And finally here we have our watercolors from the Cars watercolor set, and I was really happy with those. I mean, comparatively with everything else, they really were fantastic. And there we have our permanent marker. I just wanted to see if it actually was permanent, if it was gonna mix and blend, and it didn't, so that was a good thing. Gave this watercolor palette just one last shot, and yeah, I just couldn't get it to work. I was really hopeful, so I really pressed it, but overall it was just super light, and I don't think I ended up using it in any of my pieces. Now, what I forgot to show you guys is that this paper was actually a dollar store paper too, and you can see it is miserable. Everything goes through, it's warping, not a great thing. Okay, on this first piece, I am using that watercolor paper that I got from the dollar store. It doesn't end up turning out super well on there, but you know, we did our best. And I did go in with my markers first, moving on to some watercolors and just building up our layers, trying to get some good colors established. When you are working with watercolors, you want to make sure that you have a good thick piece of paper so that you have minimal warping, because the water will sink into that paper and kind of work against the structure of it. If you do work it too much, you can end up breaking the paper apart and you're going to get those little balls of paper that ball up. I did a ton of different mediums on all of these pieces. This one, I definitely had to focus on the markers, the watercolors, and those acrylics in the little cuppies. And I started off with a more neutral, kind of light pastel-y color and worked up my deeper shades to the more vibrant and darker pigments. The very best ones to use for those darker, deeper shades was definitely the acrylics, because they had a body to them, whereas the watercolors and the markers just didn't quite in the same way. Well, definitely the watercolors didn't, because that gives you a wash generally. So that's when I went and did the detail work with that acrylic paint and just really went in for those little trees, my deepest areas of colors, making sure that I was getting some variation in my tones throughout all of the different areas of trees, so you can get some shading and some structure and some dimension, pushing all my colors forward. On we go, there we go, very nice. And here's the final piece. Next, I decided to skip out on that dollar store paper because it's the worst, and I just used my Canson XL mixed media notebook pad paper thing that I use for sketches. I first of all went in with my markers, and then right now what I'm doing is using a white paint to try to mix it in sort of and see if I can mute out those tones, stretch them a little bit. I saw that the water wasn't working super well mixing that with the ink from the markers, so thought I would try it out with using some of the thicker, heavier body acrylic paints to try to drag those colors out, and it worked a bit. You can see that where I had a marker earliest, the tree line, those sorts of things are a lot more watercolory looking. And of course I did the exact same thing as my last one. I generally just built up these more pastel colors using our watercolors and using those acrylics, and then I just deepened the colors as I moved forward. My reason for that was establishing this just kind of general color base in the background, because with this fall foliage kind of situation, you do want to have some layers of color to show through, to have different depths going on with those little leaves. Not that this is the most realistic thing in the world, but I did want to have the effect of giving it dimension and not having flat colors, and really just popping through all the amazing colors you get at fall time. So that's what I did. Pastel watercolors onto the acrylics. And build and build and build and build, and lots of little details. I love making sure that I put in all those tiny little fine detail works, whether it's with a wave or with trees. Doing those tiny small things really is what pushes it at the end, I think, to make it an incredible piece and just elevates the entire thing overall. Third painting, here we go. This one I skipped out on the markers altogether. I was done with the markers at this point, and I just went straight for my paints, starting of course with our watercolors. Those Cars watercolors really just did a great job, and then you can see as I go into darker areas of the tree line, that's when I switch to my pigmented paints again, go for those acrylics. Of course, I don't recommend these as my top-notch first choice acrylics. You guys saw how terrible that one pack I got of them was, but I will say you can get a lot of really great work done with cheap acrylics. I was just talking to someone the other day. They were trying to decide whether to buy some colored pencils or acrylics, and I said, hey, you know what, why not just get some really cheap acrylics if that's what you're interested in, is trying that out, and you can invest in some more expensive colored pencils, because I do think that makes a difference. But with cheap acrylics, you really can get a lot of work done. I've done almost all of my acrylic paintings on this channel with cheap ones. Only recently have I started working with heavier body paints, and when I did that experiment doing the cheap versus the expensive acrylics, you guys can check out the video, I will link it in the end screen. When I did that, I realized that I was relatively happy with both. The heavy bodies definitely have their shining moments, but honestly, if you're holding yourself back because you just don't have the right paints, I say go for the plunge. Find some good cheap ones and do your magic. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you guys have any recommendations for future videos you'd like to see on this channel, content you would like to see, I know I need to get back into some of the skit stuff because I really miss that. Things are getting back on track, and I am so ready to just dive back into the videos. And I'm so grateful that you guys are still here, sticking around, so thank you for that. And you know what, let's let the good times roll. See you next Friday. Make sure you subscribe, hit the like button.